man in front of us at the counter had a squirrel sitting on his shoulder, a fat one that had apparently lived a pampered life in captivity. This is the kind of thing that doesn't quite register at first. You have to stop and say to yourself, that man has a live fox squirrel on his shoulder. The squirrel turned out to be friendly enough, in the excitable way of a critter that will never be completely tame, not unlike the human he was with, actually. When I tried to make up to the squirrel, he immediately hopped onto my shoulder and started nuzzling around like we were old friends. Vince said, "You've always had a way with animals." I said, "Yeah, but I also have an open bag of peanuts in my jacket." When the man and his squirrel left, the radiator guy looked after them and said, "No one in that whole family is quite right." We were on our way again by noon. We'd only gone a few miles out of our way, and we'd only lost an hour and a half of fishing time, but it was early in the season, when morning fishing isn't that good anyway. Not bad as breakdowns go. All in all, this is how it had been going for the last couple of seasons. Things hadn't been working out perfectly, but they'd been working out. The stretch of stream we had permission to fish ran across a wide, flat valley of hay meadows bordered by low foothills. A minor range of the Rocky Mountains was just barely visible to the west as a line of uneven gray bumps on the horizon. If you didn't already know it was there, you might not even notice it. The creek was downstream of a wedge-shaped irrigation dam that split an already small stream into two smaller channels, and at first glance it was hard to tell which was the original watercourse and which was the ditch. We guessed that the right fork was the actual stream, because what we could see of it wandered off in wide meanders, while the left fork took a 45-degree dogleg and then went straight. Real streams meander because they're in no particular hurry. Ditches go straight because they are. We walked a few hundred yards down that right fork and found distinct pools and riffles, a few still active spring seeps, and stands of old gnarled river birch that had gotten plenty of sun and water, but were as stubby and contorted as bonsai trees from living in a constant wind. This had to be it. A quarter mile across the meadow we could see the other channel. It was lined in scrubby willows, and it ran as straight as a city street. The flow in the stream was low for May, and in fact it would have seemed a little low even for August or September. In a normal year, any stream in this country would have been in the early stages of runoff, maybe even too high and muddy to fish. But it had been yet another dry winter, so maybe this was all the snow melt there was. But then we'd sort of counted on that. Normally, you'd never drive 100 miles to try out a new stream in May. You'd go in early April, hoping to slip in before the spring runoff began, or wait until sometime in late June or even early July when it came down. But over the previous two drought seasons, the usual timing had slipped a few gears. Now, May could be a good month to fish a new stream. In many drainages up and down the Front Range, the slug of snowmelt that was usually a seasonal flood had been no more than relief from the low flows of winter, and since there was less of it, the water warmed more quickly toward the high 40s, the temperature that starts the aquatic insects moving around and the trout feeding. Of course, in a strange creek half a dozen drainages north of home, it was a guess, but no more of a guess than when the runoff would come up or go down in another kind of year. Still, it was something to go on. One of the charms of fishing is that it's always a gamble. But then one of the charms of gambling is that you can use what you think you know to play the odds. Some make obscene amounts of money doing things like that with stocks, bonds, and hog futures. Others just manage to catch a few trout. The stream was lower than we expected it to be, but we thought we'd still figured it right. We just hadn't counted on that head gate taking a third of its flow to flood.